What would you do if you realized your entire life might be someone else's dream? The conference room was cold, its sterile white walls swallowing sound, while a pale, flickering fluorescent light stuttered overhead. Amy's palms pressed flat against the smooth glass table in front of her, knuckles paling under the strain. Around her, voices buzzed low with uneasy murmurs, each syllable lodging like a stone in her chest. She sat rigid, her lean figure framed sharply against the muted tones of the modern cityscape visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her auburn hair, cropped close and rebellious, caught shards of the dysfunctional lighting, casting wild, sharp-edged shadows against her pale skin. Behind rounded frames of her glasses, her eyes darted a fragile mix of disbelief and creeping dread. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer ink, muffling the tension that thickened the air like smoke. "Amy, we appreciate your work, but authenticity is what we need in this role." The voice fell heavy and clinical from across the table. Her editor's face was guarded, but the cold certainty in his words was undeniable. Amy's breath hitched sharp and tight in the hollow space between them. She blinked, swallowing hard. "You don't understand." Her voice cracked, a fragile whisper. A brusque shake of the head was the only reply, as eyes settled on her with an unspoken verdict. The words weren't accusations, they were sentences. A quiet dismissal aimed at the fragile core of her identity. She felt the sudden shift in the room, a migration of energy as colleagues turned away, conversation softening to whispers behind a veil of polite distance. The hum of air conditioning in the background sharpened, each mechanical breath amplifying her growing isolation. Amy's gaze dropped reflexively to the tabletop where a vintage pocket watch lay, a cold, ornate token left on the table moments before, its face cracked but its hands quietly forging ahead. The tick was a cruel metronome marking borrowed time, a reminder of miles she'd run only to be told she'd run badly. The faint scratch of a pen across paper broke her downward spiral. She glanced sideways, her reflection fragmented in the glass window, caught between the lit interior and the sprawling city outside. Two versions of herself stared back, one poised and contained, the other raw and fractured. "Amy, it's not personal." Her editor's voice tried to soften the blow, but it only sharpened the ache inside. "We need authenticity, truth in storytelling, not the borrowed, manufactured version." The finality was a shutter closing. A door slammed somewhere in her mind. The city lights twinkled outside, their brilliance distant, unreachable. Her fingers twitched against the cold glass, a small, defeated tremor she could neither hide nor escape. Her heart pounded a lonely rhythm as a soft, unexpected sound caught her attention, a key sliding quietly onto the glass. Damp and cool, the metal lay near her hand, heavy with unspoken secrets. The symbol of locks unopened, mysteries waiting just beyond her reach. Amy's gaze lifted slowly, her eyes scanning the room one last time before settling on the mirror-paneled wall. Faces blurred and merged, reflections multiplied, a labyrinth of identities all whispered without answer. The fluorescent light flickered again, briefly plunging the space into shadow before sputtering back to life. Amy sat still, a breath caught between despair and a glimmer of something unknown. The camera held on her, the mixture of vulnerability and flickering quiet strength etched in her face, as the city dusk deepened beyond the glass, a world moving forward even as she felt, for a moment, left behind. The city's twilight stretched thin beneath a smothering gray sky, rain sluicing down streets that gleamed under the harsh gleam of neon signs and flickering streetlights. Amy moved through the shadows of crowded sidewalks with a numbness that seemed to dull the edges of reality. The thought that she might be losing her sense of self echoed relentlessly, a grinding refrain in her mind as her footsteps echoed against the puddled pavement. She ducked into a quiet alley, the city's chorus dimming to a muffled drone. Here, the damp walls pressed in, the scent of wet stone and mildew wrapping around her like a shroud. The faint glow of a street lamp pooled uneven light over a cracked mirror anchored awkwardly against the brick. Amy stopped, eyes locking onto her reflection fractured by a jagged crack running through the glass. The woman staring back was familiar yet unknowable, eyes rimmed with exhaustion hid behind the thin frames of her glasses, auburn hair damp and tangled, lips pressed in a tight line of suppressed ache. The bustle of the city became a distant hum, the world filtered through the shard of broken glass, a distorted prismatic truth of a life slipping through her fingers. In the fragile quiet, she whispered to herself, voice barely more than breath, "Who am I really?" The mirror didn't answer, only the soft patter of rain and the distant wail of sirens punctuated the silence. Her fingers, trembling ever so slightly, reached out and touched the cracked glass, the coolness grounding yet alien. Memories flickered suddenly, unbidden and ephemeral, faces she couldn't place, places blurred by haze, moments seeming half-lived. A relentless wave of doubt washed over her. She recoiled slightly, swallowed hard, and turned away from the mirror as if trying to shake free a heavy fog wrapped tight around her. The wind snatched at her jacket, pulling her scarf free for a moment. The green fabric, worn and faded, snapped taut against the chill. It was a relic of continuity, a tenuous link to a time before the fractures began, before she felt like a ghost drifting through borrowed days. As Amy walked, the mirrored facets of a store window caught her attention. The reflection was multiplied and layered, shadowy overlays of faces and places, an illusion that mocked her mounting fear of losing identity. She paused, pressing a hand to the cold glass, feeling the paradox of proximity and otherness. Her breath caught as she glimpsed a glint of something in the corner of her coat pocket. Her heart quickened, a surge of adrenaline breaking through the haze. Fingers brushed the fabric, pulling free a small, cold object, a vintage ring, inscribed with initials unfamiliar yet burned into her skin by familiarity. The urban noise was swallowed in an instant, time bent, shrinking around the silent pulse of discovery. The ring felt heavy, tangible proof that her life was not as real as her own as she believed. A distant car horn blared sharply, fracturing the encroaching stillness, yanking her attention back to the rain-soaked street. Heart hammering, Amy slid the ring into her palm beneath her glove and clutched it like a lifeline, a secret key to mysteries she had yet to understand. She moved away from the window, the city's chaotic symphony swelling again. Yet inside, something had shifted, a quiet ember of resolve sparked beneath the layers of uncertainty. With one last glance at her fracturing reflection, Amy's eyes shimmered not with resignation but a tentative spark of something new. The camera held on her collapsing silhouette framed by rain-washed streets and flickering neon, the woman caught between worlds, suspended at the edge of awakening. The city's twilight deepened into a muted blue, shadows lengthening across the narrow alley where Amy paused beneath a flickering street lamp. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflective as fragmented pieces of a fractured sky. Her breath misted faintly in the chill air, mingling with the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional echo of footsteps. Inside her coat pocket, a strange weight settled, a cool, solid presence that drew her fingers instinctively to explore. Her heart quickened with an indistinct mixture of curiosity and dread as she pulled free a small, vintage ring, its tarnished surface etched with delicate initials that made no sense to her. The metal was cold, yet it warmed slightly beneath her touch, as if stirred to life by her grasp. Amy's gaze flickered up to the row of shattered mirrors mounted on the crumbling brick wall beside her, fragments of glass reflecting a multitude of versions of herself. Each fractured reflection was subtly different, as if each shard held a sliver of a different life, a stranger's story bleeding into her own. The image of herself splintered and multiplied, a distorted dance of identity and doubt. The pocket watch she had found earlier, the one whose hands never aligned, now pulsed faintly in her other hand, its ticking a relentless reminder of borrowed time slipping through her fingers. She traced the cold metal slowly, the sound of the ticking a cruel metronome in the stillness, marking her unraveling reality. Her breath hitched, a shiver traveling down her spine, as the initials on the ring seemed to glow faintly in the street lamp's uneasy light, a secret beacon summoning a past long concealed. The layers of Amy's life peeled back moment by moment, exposing a tapestry woven with threads unclaimed and truths unspoken. A soft swirl of wind stirred the rain-soaked leaves at her feet, whispering secrets that curled around her ankles like spectral fingers. The green scarf, draped carelessly around her neck, caught the breeze and snapped sharply, a symbol of the fragile connection to a self she barely recognized anymore. A sudden flicker from the street lamp plunged her briefly into darkness, and in that suspended moment, Amy's reflection in a mirror shard caught her eye, a reflection not wholly her own. Her face was marked by a faint, elusive smile, a harbinger of change nestled within the turmoil. The rain started again, first a delicate patter, then a steady cascade washing the cold city streets. She closed her eyes, a quiet resolve blooming amid the turmoil. The weight in her pocket was no longer just a chill. It was a calm invitation to delve into the forgotten, to wrest back the discarded pieces of her identity. Amy's fingers curled tightly around the ring. Her eyes opened with a flicker of determination buried beneath layers of confusion. The city's towering silhouettes stood against the stormy sky, a dark and silent witness to the unfolding mystery. The camera held on the glimmering ring and her transforming gaze, the split reflection in the broken glass behind her promising a journey far beyond the shadows she had once known. The storm's howl mingled with the thunder of her own heartbeat, setting the stage for a story bound by secrets and the quest for truth. In that storm-kissed, flickering light, Amy took the first, tentative step toward reclaiming the life that was her own, or perhaps the life she had forgotten to live. The rain fell in relentless sheets, smothering the city beneath a slate-gray sky that reflected Amy's turmoil. She rushed through shadowed streets, her silhouette flickering beneath the harsh neon signs, feet splashing through puddles that mirrored a fractured world. Her breath came in sharp bursts, fogging the air, mingling with the scent of damp asphalt and cold metal. The ring, heavy and foreign in her pocket, throbbed quietly against her thigh, an anchor pulled taut beneath layers of uncertainty. She felt its weight like an unseen tether pulling her deeper into the mystery that had suddenly rewritten the fabric of her existence. Under the bleeding glow of a flickering street lamp, Amy paused before a grime-streaked glass storefront. Her reflection shattered and multiplied, fragments overlapping a kaleidoscope of selves both known and unknown. She reached out, fingertips brushing cold glass that offered no comfort, only fractured truths. The city's restless pulse was a distant thrum beneath the sudden storm of questions flooding her mind. Each pulse echoed memories that were no longer hers, but borrowed from lives traced in fragmented shadows. Her fingers toyed with the pocket watch, its uneven ticking a cruel reminder that time was a borrowed currency she didn't fully own. Her thoughts spiraled as she descended into an abandoned park, the skeletal branches of leafless trees etched starkly against the dim sky. The ground was slick with mud, reflecting the weak light of a distant, flickering street lamp like a shattered mirror of a fractured mind. Here, alone, the world's chaos receded, leaving just the soft rustle of wind and the thudding of her own heart. She pulled the worn scarf tighter, a gesture both of protection and defiance. The green fabric was a whisper of herself, a fragile banner amid a gathering storm of uncertainty. In the hollow silence, she muttered, "I can't let this define me." Her voice was barely audible, swallowed by the wind. A sudden vibration startled her. The ring shifted, a faint pulse against her palm that sent a shiver up her spine. It was as though it breathed, a slumbering force awakened by her touch, pulling her toward truths she was yet unprepared to face. Amy's eyes brightened with a flicker of resolve amid the haze of doubt. The city's distant sirens wailed incongruent with the fragile hope stirring within her. She squared her shoulders, the first tentative step toward reclaiming a fractured self etched on her face. "Maybe this," she breathed, voice trembling but determined, "is where I find who I really am." The last wisps of rain clung to the edges of the streetlights as the camera lingered on Amy's face, a canvas of vulnerability and burgeoning courage. Her hand clenched the ring slowly, the weight both a burden and a beacon. The scene faded on her silhouette framed by the darkened cityscape, poised at the cusp of awakening and deeper revelation, the path before her shrouded in shadows and light. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to flow on the rain-slicked air, a silent invitation for what was yet to come. The city lights flickered through the heavy rain, their reflection fractured on the pavement like shards of a broken self. Amy pressed her palm against the cold glass of her apartment window, watching the world blur beneath the storm. Inside, the room was dimly lit, shadows pooling in corners where memories and secrets gathered like specters. The ring lay heavy in her pocket, a silent weight anchoring her to truths she barely dared acknowledge. She sat hunched over her desk, the scattered notes and photographs a disordered map of her unraveling reality. The room whispered with the echoes of past conversations, alliances formed and fractured. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number with a cryptic warning: "Not everyone you trust wants to see you awake." The words crawled under her skin, turning suspicion toward those she held dear. A fragile alliance she had built with an ally from a shared past now felt like a thread strained to its breaking point. They met oftentimes in quiet cafes or shadowed corners of the city, conversations heavy with implications, the lines between friend and foe blurring in the shifting light. "You have the ring," her friend said one evening, voice low, eyes haunted. "But they want it back. And they'll come for you." Amy's fingers tightened around the cold metal in her pocket, the ring pulsing softly, as if alive with a secret urgency. Doubt gnawed at her resolve, yet beneath it was a burgeoning fire, a determination to unearth the hidden mechanics of her borrowed life. The nights grew restless. Dreams bled into waking moments, fragmented faces, whispered names, shadows slipping behind every glance. The streets became less safe as strange figures lingered in the peripheries, watching, waiting. Paranoia clung to her like a second skin. One misted morning, Amy found herself at the edge of an old bookshop, its windows misted and the door slightly ajar. Inside, dust hung in the air, mingling with the faint scent of old paper and leather, a cavern of histories waiting to be uncovered. Her hands trembled as she leafed through leather-bound journals, seeking fragments of a life not fully hers. Amid the fragile pages, a photograph slipped free, her own face captured decades ago, standing beside a stranger whose eyes seemed to pierce through time. A shiver traced down her spine as she realized the depths of the conspiracy enveloping her existence. Returning home, she pieced together fragmented clues, coded letters, surveillance photos, names linked to an unseen organization manipulating lives like strings in a puppeteer's hands. Her world was no longer her own. It was a stage set for a hidden narrative that sought to control, suppress, and rewrite. In a moment of fragile victory, she discovered a hidden room beneath the storage archives walls lined with files cataloging the borrowed identities of countless souls. Among them lay dossiers bearing her name, with annotations detailing shifts, transfers, resets. A cold, metallic crunch echoed behind Hearth entrance ceiling shut. Her heart hammered as she faced the suffocating enclosure, the harsh reality closing in. Amid the darkness, the ring pulsed faintly, illuminating cryptic symbols on the walls, keys to unlocking the hidden truths shrouding her stolen life. The camera tightened on Amy's determined eyes as the scene faded, hanging in suspended tension caught between revelation and entrapment, the fragile line between survival and surrender. The sterile glow of the underground archive was suffocating, its fluorescent lights casting a pale wash over walls lined with leather-bound ledgers and filing cabinets that seemed to stretch endlessly. Amy's breath came in shaky bursts as she sifted through the dense labyrinth of classified documents, pages whispering secrets of stolen identities and lives overwritten. Her fingers trembled as she pulled a folder marked with her name, worn and faded, yet undeniable. Her eyes widened, heart pounding a frantic rhythm beneath the weight of revelation. The photographs inside were haunting images of herself in places she'd never visited, dressed in clothes foreign to her style, posed with strangers whose faces twisted in knowing smiles. The documents detailed implants, memory modifications, schedules of identity shifts, her life cataloged as one in a series of orchestrated performances. Flashes of memory assaulted her. Pale wristwatch ticking down borrowed time, fragmented reflections in shattered mirrors, the weight of the ring burning cold on her fingertip. The threads of her existence unraveled, exposing the terrifying truth that she was ensnared in a grand design, a pawn in a conspiracy that manipulated souls like puppets. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke the numbness. Her closest ally entered, eyes shimmering with a conflicted honesty, yet shadowed by guilt. "I didn't want you to find out like this," the words trembled, "but I'm part of it. We're all trapped, Amy." Betrayal sliced sharper than any blade. Trust crumbled as the Alley's confession confirmed the chilling scope of deception. Amy staggered back, the room spinning a vortex of lost friendships, distorted identities, and lonely battles. "Why? How could you?" she whispered, voice breaking. The Alley's silence was the loudest answer. Amy's gaze dropped to the antique pocket watch resting on the edge of the table, its hands frozen yet counting down in her mind. Time, borrowed and fleeting, was slipping through her grasp. In this crucible of unveiled truths and shattered bonds, clarity emerged, a painful dawning realization that to reclaim herself, she must confront the full, unvarnished horror of her existence. The camera tightened on her face, a mix of devastation and defiance as she whispered resolutely, "I'll find the truth, no matter the cost." A sudden echo of footsteps punctuated the tense air, the room's exit sealed with a furtive click. The walls seemed to close in as shadows converged, amplifying the impending sense of reckoning. The scene faded amid the throbbing pulse of the enclosed space, Amy's silhouette framed by flickering light, a lone figure on the precipice between destruction and awakening, her journey irrevocably transformed. The city skyline sprawled beneath a sky swollen with heavy clouds, a thick, suffocating grayness that seemed to bleed into the narrow streets below. Amy stood alone in the dim glow of her apartment, the muted light casting elongated shadows across the sparse room. Outside, the wind howled through the urban canyon, rattling window panes as if nature itself lamented the unraveling of her world. Her frame slumped against the cold glass, palms flat as if trying to steady the trembling fragments of her existence. The weight of truth bore down upon her, crushing. She traced the rim of the vintage pocket watch lying on the desk, its hands frozen at an unknown hearttime, locked, borrowed, suspended like her sense of self. The room seemed to close in, its quiet punctuated only by the faint, irregular ticking of a second watch, discordant and unpredictable. Her eyes, shadowed and raw, caught her reflection in the darkened mirror. Multiple faces layered upon each other, a fractured self staring back with hollowed eyes devoid of certainty. A slow breath escaped her lips as memories flashed, betrayal etched in every glance from those she once trusted, friendships twisted by deceit, a shattering revelation that the life she inhabited was choreographed by unseen hands. The ring, heavy in her pocket, burned cold, a binding chain to a narrative not her own. It was a talisman of fractured identity, of lives borrowed and memories overwritten. Her fingers clenched around it as though holding on to the last thread of reality. The wind outside shifted suddenly, stalking the street with sharp, icy gusts that rattled the blinds, casting flickering patterns across the walls like restless spirits. The city lights blurred in the rain's streaked windows, a kaleidoscope of fractured luminance reflecting the chaotic storm raging within. A whispered voice echoed in her minden, indistinct, haunting murmur fading and returning like a restless breath. It was the silent accusation of a self slipping away, a question unanswerable. Who am I beneath the shadows? Her body trembled, shoulders heaving with silent sobs, the room swallowing the sound, a mute witness to the disintegration of her inner world. The thick air tasted of cold despair and loneliness, an oppressive veil that dimmed the flickering candle atop the desk. Her gaze fell once more upon the mirror, the fractured reflection shifting subtly, as if the glass itself held echoes of other lives, other selves. The woman staring back was fragmented, unmoored, a spirit stretched thin between truth and illusion. Slowly, with a weary hand, she reached toward the mirror, fingertips grazing the cool surface. A shiver passed through her fingers, spreading like frost. Her breath caught, eyes brimming with unshed tears that reflected the fractured light. Then, the candle flickered violently, shadows swallowing the room in a momentary darkness that felt like the very edge of oblivion. When the light steadied, Amy remained alone, unraveling, and poised on the precipice of losing everything she held dear. The scene lingered on the stillness of her formed weight of a soul fractured, the haunting silence broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the relentless rain tapping its mournful rhythm against the windowpane. The night pressed heavily against the glass pane, rain tapping rhythmically like a sorrowful drum against the loneliness inside Amy's apartment. Shadows pooled thickly around her, converging in the corners like silent, suffocating ghosts. She sat motionless on the threadbare couch, her fingers limp, clutching nothing but emptiness. The cold air crept through the cracked window, threading icy fingers beneath her cardigan, chilling the fragile warmth of her wavering spirit. In the dark, a dim glow from the street lamp outside cast fractured light across the room, fractured much like the shards of her once solid self. The faint ticking of an old pocket watch punctuated the oppressive silence, its uneven rhythm a cruel echo of time borrowed and lost. The watch lay forgotten on the table nearby, its hands forever frozen, as if mocking the futility of her attempts to grasp a life that had slipped beyond her control. Amy's gaze drifted into the shattered fragments of a mirror mounted crooked on the wall. The reflections multiplied and splintered her face into countless fragments, each a different woman, each a stranger, and all bearing the weight of her unknown lives. Her eyes, once sharp and searching, were now vacant pools reflecting the haunted haze of a soul unraveling. No sound came from within her lips, no words could dare to cross the chasm. Her breath was shallow, a ghostly whisper in the vast emptiness, swallowed quickly by the cold air that seemed to consume her entirely. The city's distant hum was faint and meaningless, a world continuing without Hera background noise to an existence teetering on collapse. Suddenly, a small silver ring slid from her trembling fingers, clattering on the wooden floor. It rolled across the cold surface and came to rest in a shadowed crevice. Amy's eyes fixed without hope, as if the loss of that tiny circle signified the last thread of all she had believed herself to be. A flicker of the street lamp cast a sharp, jagged shadow of the ring against the wall, a stark silhouette resembling a broken key, a symbol lost within the loneliness of night. Amy's body slumped further into silence, her heartbeat the only measure of life's fragile continuance. The room stilled, the ticking ceased, the shadows deepened, tight and unyielding. As the camera lingered on her figure, alone and fragmented, the scene dissolved into a suffocating quiet, a breath held on the edge of oblivion. The darkness embraced her wholly, a silent surrender to the vast unknown waiting beyond the fracture. No movement followed. No sound echoed. Only the stillness remained, a canvas upon which the first faint outlines of reckoning and fragile hope would someday be painted. The room was suffused with dusk's muted blue light, pouring quietly through the cracked blinds like solemn tears. Amy sat slumped in a weathered armchair, the worn fabric pressing into her weary frame. Her fingers clutched the cold metal of the ring, the same ring that had opened the door to her unraveling life. Now, between her fingers, it felt both familiar and alien, a relic of identities lost and borrowed time slipping away like sand through trembling hands. Her gaze was fixed, unblinking, on the fractured mirror atop the rickety wooden shelf. Its blemished surface reflected shards of her fragmented self-fractured portraits overlapping in an endless, distorted dance. Each layer whispered secrets of lives she had lived or never truly owned, identities borrowed but never claimed. In the dim light, the mirror's cracks felt like lines of fate, paths forever altered and tangled beyond repair. A soft sigh escaped her lips, barely audible over the distant hum of the city night outside, an ambient pulse that felt so distant from the overwhelming silence that cocooned her. The room smelled faintly of dry paper, dust, and the bitter iron tang of forgotten tears. Music, the faintest note, haunting and ethereal, drifted amidst the silence. It was a fragile song she remembered from childhood, slipping through creaky floors and walls, rising to meet her broken heart. The melody was a thread woven from memory, faint but steady enough to tether her to a spark of hope. Slowly, she reached towards a battered photograph resting beside a closed book of letters. The photo was aged, edges curled, featuring a woman whose eyes carried the same fierce light Amy recognized in herself, a reflection not just of past, but of strength yet to be reclaimed. Her fingers trembled as she traced the worn green scarf depicted in the photo, the fabric the same as her own signature. It was a symbol, older than she'd understood, a silent promise binding the fractured memories into a fragile whole. In the quiet room, a soft whisper seemed to thread through the air around her, barely a breath, yet a call to awaken. It was as though the ring pulsed anew in her palm, infusing her soul with a fragile glimmer of possibility. She closed her eyes, the weight of despair momentarily lightened by a forgotten truth stirring quietly beneath the wreckage. The camera lingered on her faces, oftened by the gentlest break in the storm, eyes moist but determined. As night gave way slowly to the faintest wash of dawn, Amy's voice barely escaped as a whisper, "I'm still here." The world held its breath, the first tendrils of light coaxing shadows to retreat, and in that suspended moment, hope shimmered, a fragile beacon lighting the path toward a yet unseen freedom. The scene faded softly, the lingering image of the cracked mirror reflecting a single unbroken shard of Amy's unwavering gaze, poised on the precipice between the end and a new beginning. A faint dawn seeped through the fractured blinds of the abandoned office, casting a muted golden hue over the cluttered desk strewn with scattered papers and half-forgotten memories. Amy stood quietly in the center of this silent chamber, her silhouette a delicate contrast against the soft light that spilled over the room. Her breathing was slow, deliberate, as if she feared disturbing the fragile peace awakening within her. The air was thick with the scent of dust and stale ink, a stillness that spoke of years frozen in time, now gently melting away with the promise of change. Her eyes, once clouded with doubt and loss, shimmered with a flicker of clarity. She lifted her hand, fingers trembling, clutching the vintage ring that had tethered her to a labyrinth of fractured identities. In that moment, she saw through the fog of betrayal and confusion her reflection in a cracked mirror on the wall, fragmented but nevertheless alive. The shards reflected a woman still wounded but beginning to piece herself together, like a mosaic emerging from brokenness. The ring, now warm beneath her fingertips, pulsed softly, a heartbeat in harmony with her awakening spirit. The muted sunlight kissed her face, illuminating the faint lines of exhaustion that traced her features, softened by a new resolve. Her gaze drifted to the window past the glass, the city stretched quiet in the early morning hush. She felt the weight of the revelations, the betrayals, the loss, yet amid the chaos, a fragile spark ignited. A slow, calming breath escaped her lips as she lowered her hand, the ring still clenched tightly. The shadows receded, retreating like the dark memories that had haunted her, giving way to a new dawn. The room's stillness embraced Hera, silent, steady affirmation that she was reclaiming a part of herself long buried beneath the rubble. Her eyes closed for a moment, an internal pause, listening to the faint hum of her heartbeat, the gentle rustle of the city waking outside. The soft glow of hope shimmered like the first light touching the horizon, tentative, fragile, yet undeniably present. In that hushed space, an unspoken vow formed of resilience, of forgiveness, of the first step toward justice. Her fingers loosened around the ring, letting it rest gently in her palm, a symbolic act of release and rebirth. She looked once more into the mirror, her reflection softly smiling, hinting at the unyielding strength blossoming from her fractured past. The camera lingered, capturing her silhouette framed by the dawn's delicate glow, an image of quiet transformation, one that whispered of possibilities renewed and the long journey ahead. The scene drifted into silence, filled only with the ambient promise of a new beginning. The first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the old stone walls, casting a fragile glow across the dusty files and ancient artifacts strewn on the table. Amy moved slowly, her eyes fixed on the objects before her: a delicate key, a tarnished pocket watch, and a battered leather journal. These symbols, once symbols of her fragmented self, now shimmered with new purpose. The shadows in the room threatened to return, but she stood tall, her breath steady, drawing strength from her core. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and muted memories, the quiet hum of her heartbeat echoing in the silence. With deliberate care, Amy reached for the key, feeling its cold weight in her palm. She closed her eyes, imagining unlocking the hidden truths buried beneath layers of manipulation. Her fingertips brushed over the inscription on the key, an inscription she'd seen before, yet now it meant more, as if awakening her to a purpose long suppressed. She reached for the pocket watch, its surface tarnished but still whispering of borrowed time. Her fingers lingered, tracing the worn edges, before pressing it to her chest. The faint ticking, the rhythmic reminder of time, stirred something deep within her. It was not just a clock. It was a heartbeat, a pulse reminding her of her own agency. Her gaze shifted to the battered journal, pages filled with hurried notes, sketches, and cryptic messages. She flipped through the pages, each scribble a fragment of her journey, a map through darkness, leading toward the light. Her eyes caught a particular entry, a simple phrase: "The truth is within." A smile flickered, fragile yet resolute, breaking through her face tinted with exhaustion. The room seemed to glow a little brighter, the muted colors giving way to a shimmer of hope. The shadows retreated, pulled back by her newfound resolve. The symbols, key, watch, mirror came alive in her mind, aligning into a coherent purpose, to unlock not only the secrets of her past but her own power. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, carrying the scent of salt and dawn. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs, anchoring her to this moment of clarity. Her hand, previously trembling, grew steady as she lifted the key, holding it upright toward the window, as if offering herself to the unfolding possibility. "This is only the beginning," her voice whispered, barely audible, yet filled with unwavering conviction. The camera lingered, capturing her silhouette against the rising light, poised on the precipice of purpose, emboldened by the revelation that, despite the darkness, hope still persisted. The symbols shimmered briefly in the soft dawn, a silent promise that her journey to reclaim her truth and redefine herself was now truly underway. The first light of dawn fractured through the broken windows of the ancient chamber, casting long, shimmering rays over the relics of her journey: tarnished keys, the pocket watch now silent, and the ancient, ink-stained documents. Amy stood at the center, her silhouette bathed in the golden glow, a figure reborn from the depths of despair into silent strength. Her breathing was steady, each inhalation a testament to the resilience she had forged through the crucible of betrayal and revelation. Clad in clothing that echoed her past and her truth, casual yet resolute, she reached out her hand to grasp the cracked mirror mounted on the wall. Her reflection was no longer fragmented but whole, a luminous mirror of her inner rebirth. The scars of her struggle faded into the soft light, replaced by a quiet, luminous confidence that radiated from her core. The room pulsed with a sacred energy, the symbols of her quest aligning: the key, the watch, the mirror, each resonating with newfound purpose, harmonizing in a silent symphony of truth and justice. Her eyes, which once searched and doubted, now shone with clarity, holding within them a resolve that would shape her destiny. "This is my truth," she whispered, her voice clear and unwavering. The words felt like a vow and affirmation that she would no longer be swayed by shadows, but stand firm against whatever darkness still lurked beyond the horizon. Gently, she reached for the key placed in her palm, the key to the unseen doors of her soul, and held it aloft, catching the dawn's first light. The luminous beams danced across her face, illuminating the calm certainty that had taken root. Each beat of her heart now echoed with the profound acknowledgement: she had reclaimed her narrative, her identity, her very self. Silence settled once more, a peaceful, weightless calm that enveloped her like a shroud of dawn. The shadows receded, surrendering to the rising sun, the ultimate symbol of new beginnings and unseen battles won. Amy stepped back, her gaze lingering on the relics that had guided her through darkness. Her silhouette, steadfast and tranquil, faded into the radiant light, no longer a victim of manipulation but a guardian of her ancient truths, a witness to her own resilience. As the camera pulled away, capturing her figure against the dawnlit horizon, it lingered on the quiet majesty of her calm, an embodiment of emancipation, poised at the threshold of a new dawn, ready to face the unknown with unshakable purpose. The gentle glow of dawn seeped softly through the window of Amy's modest apartment, casting a warm, amber light across the neat, yet unhurried space. A canvas of peace had emerged in the wake of her tumultuous journey, a stillness that felt both fragile and profound. Her reflection danced in the mirror, a face touched by exhaustion but illuminated with a quiet, resilient grace. Small creases of a hard-earned smile lingered on her lips, betraying a serenity that had once seemed impossible. She sat quietly in her favorite chair, a cup of untouched coffee steaming in her hands as her gaze drifted out the window. The city beyond was awakening, but within her, a stillness had settled, an understanding that the chaos had finally found its peace. All the shadows she'd wrestled with, the betrayals, the manipulations, the fractured identities had begun to recede, replaced by the gentle balm of acceptance. Her fingers play with the delicate chain around her neck, the same chain that held the mysterious ring, a symbol now of release and self-ownership. She pressed her palm softly against her heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her fingertips. The mirror reflected a woman who had faced the abyss and returned whole, or at least whole enough. The room was filled with quiet symbolism, the soft rustle of papers on a shelf, the faint scent of bound pages, and dawn's first light, all whispers of her inner awakening. A small, serene smile broke across her face, a quiet acknowledgement that she was finally at peace with her past, her struggles, her shattered and reforged self. She inhaled deeply, the air infused with the promise of new beginnings. The city's awakening noise, a distant siren, a bird's song, faded into the background, insignificant compared to the symphony of her own peace. Her eyes closed for a moment, a silent prayer of gratitude for the strength to embrace her true essence. Slowly, she uncrossed her legs and rose, her movements unhurried, as if honoring her own healing process. Her steps took her to the window, where she looked out over the rising city, now bathed in the tender glow of sunrise. The horizon stretched infinitely, symbolic of the boundless freedom that lay ahead, both within and beyond her. In that quiet dawn, a gentle clarity settled deep within her, realization that her journey was not over but had transformed. The chaos had become her chrysalis, and now she stepped forth, unshackled, into the luminous promise of her true self. The camera pulled back slowly, capturing her silhouette against the awakening cityscape, strengthened, serene, and finally embracing the complex mosaic of her identity. A soft wind stirred her hair, the light glinting on the chain around her neck, a final whisper of her newfound peace. The scene faded, leaving only the gentle hum of dawn, a timeless reminder that within chaos, grace resides, waiting patiently for those brave enough to seek it. The dawn's light stretched softly across the tranquil cityscape, gently illuminating Amy's face as she stood before the mirror. Her reflection was no longer fragmented but whole, calm, steady, rooted in an unshakable serenity. Her short auburn hair caught the morning glow, framing her expressive face which, moments ago, brimmed with uncertainty and fear. Now, there was a quiet strength that radiated outward, like a dawn breaking after a long night. She reached out slowly, her fingertips tracing the mirror's cool surface, tracing the subtle outline of her own silhouette, an act of acceptance, of reconciliation. Her eyes lingered on her reflection, a mirror of her inner transformation, eyes softened with understanding, a gentle smile whispering of peace, of finally embracing her many selves. The room was still, filled with remnants of her journey, an ancient ring resting on a velvet cloth, a stack of illuminated documents now open and peaceful in her hands, and a single key laid near her side. The symbols, the mirror, the watch, the key had become her silent companions, guiding her toward this moment of harmony. She took a deep breath, slowly exhaling the weight of years of doubt, betrayal, and fractured realities. The shadows that had haunted her were dissolving into the light, giving way to a truth that she now owned without shame. Her heart beat steady as she reached for the ring, now warm and glowing, faintly a token of her past, her present, and her unbreakable internal core. A faint breeze touched her skin, carrying in scents of fresh awakening earth, rain, the promise of a new day. She clasped the ring delicately, feeling its gentle warmth seep into her bones, anchoring her firmly in the moment, in herself. In the silent sanctuary of dawn, Amy closed her eyes, briefly listening to the rhythm of her breath, the pulse of her soul aligning with the universe's quiet lullaby. Her mind drifted to the futures of those lives she had glimpsed, both borrowed and genuinely her own, and she realized, without doubt, that her journey had transformed her into the keeper of her truth. She finally whispered, almost to herself, "I am here. Entire. Whole." The words carried a depth of peace that no chaos could shatter, no betrayal could undo. The camera pulled back slowly, capturing her still figure against the rising sun, a symbol of reconciliation, of integration. The scene faded into the warm glow of dawn, leaving her standing at the edge of her deepest understanding, at peace, finally united with herself, bathed in the soft light of her unshakable truth. The dawn's gentle light seeped softly through the window, illuminating the room with a tranquil warmth that contrasted the storm of chaos she had weathered. Amy sat peacefully on the edge of her bed, the soft fabric of her clothes catching the faint glow of morning. Her reflection in the mirror was no longer fractured but serene, an image of completeness she had struggled to reclaim. Her short auburn hair framed her face, now calm, bearing the weariness of her journey but also the quiet strength of a person who had truly begun to understand herself. She reached out and brushed her fingertips lightly over the mirror's glass, the surface that once reflected her fractured soul. Today, it reflected unity, harmony, her truths woven into one. The ring, now quietly resting on her bedside table, shimmered in the morning light, a symbol of the countless identities she had embraced and relinquished, each one integral to her evolving story. In the stillness of the room, her eyes lingered on the small, delicate key hanging around her neck, an emblem of access, of unlocking hidden parts of herself and the mysteries she had uncovered. She smiled softly, a gentle gesture, releasing the last remnants of doubt, guilt, and fear. Her breath was slow, deliberate, each inhale a moment of surrender, each exhale a testament to acceptance. Outside, the world was waking, but her inner universe had found its peace. The melody of birdsong drifted in through the open window, a quiet hymn of renewal. The shadows of the past had receded, replaced by a luminous understanding that her journey was not about erasing herself but embracing the fullness of her being. Amy rose gracefully, her movements unhurried but deliberate, as if honoring the quiet beauty of this moment. The camera captured her silhouette against the rising sun, steady, unshaken, a figure reborn from the depths of her despair. She crossed the room and gently shut the door behind her, stepping into the day with an unspoken promise to herself. The scene faded into a panoramic shot of the city, bathed in the golden glow of dawn, an eternal symbol of hope, of new beginnings and the peace that comes from acceptance. The stillness lingered, a visual metaphor for harmony, a silent testament that within chaos, peace can flourish, waiting patiently for those brave enough to embrace it. What hidden stories might your possessions tell? Share your thoughts below.